I take, for instance, the example of the United States that I'm familiar with. And in the United States system, you find that governance devolves to the lowest levels. If you take, for instance, the subject of policing, which is part of the conversation that transpired yesterday, you find that policing goes all the way to even the campus police. At the university where I did my postgraduate studies in New York, we had a campus police. And so you have responsibilities devolving to the lowest levels. But in the United States, for instance, unlike what happens in this country, where you have, as somebody would say, feeding bottle federalism. You have to go to the federation account to get funds. In the US system, there is no such feeding bottle federalism. You have to raise your funds and use the funds to sustain yourself. And so when you look at the fourth schedule to the Constitution, which sets out the functions of local governments, if local governments are allowed to optimally exercise those roles, at the end of the day, those are the mechanisms through which they can generate the funds. And they will invariably have to be prudent in the management of the funds. Because if they don't, and along with the taxes that they collect, if they don't raise sufficient funds to sustain the local governments, then they eventually become bankrupt. If you have followed developments in the United States, there are a number of municipalities and mayoralties that have actually been declared bankrupt. So if you have a situation in which people realize that the manner in which they manage the resources, the manner in which they provide services for their people will ultimately determine their viability, then people will sit up. Ask yourself, except for our feeding bottle federalism, there are many of our states and local governments that should ordinarily be self-sustaining, that should ordinarily be viable. But if you look at the statistics, apart from Lagos, Ogun, Rivers, probably Kano, Delta, maybe Akwa Ibom and others, many of the states as they stand today are not even viable.
I think we seem to have lost him there, maybe due to network. Okay, he's back. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm just making the point that part of what we need to do is to address this feeding bottle federalism that we grapple with. Let us look inwards. Let us explore ways through which we can ensure that our states are viable. If you take Plateau State, for instance, if we leverage tourism, if we leverage our weather, if we leverage our agriculture and other dynamics, there's absolutely no reason why we cannot be viable. And the same is true of many other states. Nigeria is one of the most endowed countries in the world. But Hillary Clinton made a very profound statement that Nigeria is too rich to be poor and yet too poor to be rich. That's the kind of paradox that we are confronted with. And so part of the responsibility of governance to come back to the role of local governments and how this plays out in other climes is to make sure that, consistent with the fact that they are the bedrock, they are the foundation of governance, if we impact will be more readily by the people can breathe, and they will appreciate our democracy in a very profound way, which will in turn have ripple effects in terms of advancing the cause of democracy at other tiers of government. And so we need to really take a second look at the local government system in a more profound manner that will deliver the dividends of democracy for the people beyond the system that we have at the moment.